Are negative Google reviews hurting your business? Don't let unfair feedback cost you customers. At Webamax, we specialize in removing false, misleading, and damaging reviews so your online reputation stays strong. Our expert team works quickly and legally to clean up your digital presence, helping you rebuild trust. Visit us on the web at www.gowebamax.com. That's GOWEBIMAX.com, or text us for a free quote at 856-840-8343. Don't let bad reviews define you. Get immediate help from Webamax.
Come meet me at the Musial with Alan and Daniel. We'll talk about the Cardinals all night long. Everyone come gather round, listen to your favorite sound. We'll talk about the Cardinals all night long. We'll talk the games and all the rest, about the team that we love best. We'll talk about the Cardinals all night long. We're gonna talk about the Cardinals all night long.
Good evening and welcome into another edition of Meet Me at Musial. I'm your host, Daniel Shoptaw at C70. No Alan Medlock. Alan's getting ready. I believe he told me that the season starts a week from today on March 1st. So he's getting that final prep in for his team, which was not helped by the winter weather this week. So joining me tonight, former writer at Viva Alberto's, and now I don't know. I don't know what you call a retired Cardinal blogger. Whatever it is, it's Jason Hill from formerly from Viva Alberto's. Jason, how are you tonight?
Happy, I guess you could say. What do you call a former blogger at Viva Alberto's? You call them happy, I suppose. So not nearly as busy as I used to be. That's for sure.
I'm about to say, not only did you not have to try to write this winter, which would have been very, very difficult, but it's a lot less stressful trying to figure out this team or figure out what you're going to write about this team, I guess. How was it this winter? I mean, I don't imagine it for various reasons that we will get into. You had to do your normal number crunching and everything like that. Did you find it kind of enjoyable to have a different type of winter?
In some ways, yes, I think so. Actually, I'm one of those weirdos that's always enjoyed the off season. I enjoy the transactions. I enjoy the debate. Honestly, once the season starts, it is just about playing the games. And obviously, baseball.
Right.
I do enjoy watching baseball. Don't get me wrong. But there's not. I mean, I realize that there's daily talk shows and radio and all that stuff, but I don't get caught up in the day-to-day happenings of a baseball team. Sometimes bullpen performs, sometimes they don't. Sometimes the starter goes deep, sometimes not. Sometimes the offense scores, sometimes they don't. There's 162 games, and it tends to even out about the way that we expected, and those expectations are set in the offseason. So that's always where I've kind of focused my attention on how can you build a team that is going to not just compete in an NL Central that is not as weak as people claim, but my goal is always to build a team that can contend for the World Series. And so this offseason, clearly that was not the intention of the Cardinals, and so I was pretty pleased not to have to live and die by every news conference or tweet from MLB trade rumors or stay up late watching the winter meetings. It was just all nothing's going to happen, and then nothing did.
Yeah, I think we all expected limited activity, but I don't think we all expected zero activity. I mean, maybe Bailey Horn would beg to differ with us, but I think for the most part, we would all agree nothing happened. And so here we are, spring training, with a team that looks very similar, except for some departed veterans. A team that I guess was better than some people think. You know, it was a over 500 team last year, but also, you know, didn't necessarily set the world on fire.
Yeah, I still struggle to kind of place the 2024 Cardinals, and I can kind of explain why if I can pull up there it is. Yes. So they won 83 games, which is it's not great, but compared to
Mhm.
what they did in 2023, you could call it respectable,
Right.
below Cardinal standards, no doubt, but yet also respectable. The thing though about it was that in their Pythagorean win loss, Daniel, I don't know if you've ever looked at that for that team last
Mhm.
year or not,
Mhm.
but their Pythagorean win loss based upon the runs scored and runs allowed, and I know there's a lot of factors that go into that, and runners in scoring position and this and that or another thing, but their expected win loss record was only 76 and 86, quite a
Mhm.
bit difference from what they actually did. Credit Ollie Marmol if you want to. Credit a fantastic bullpen if you want to. Good luck in one run games if you want to. All kinds of things you can point at. But it felt like to me that this team played more like a 76 win team than an 83 win team. And so yeah, it was just one of those seasons that it was hard to make something of, and that honestly that showed up in the TV ratings and in the ballpark attendance too.
Yeah, I mean, there was that stretch from May to, you know, what, Mother's Day to 4th of July, basically.
Yeah, yeah, yep,
That was really, really good.
yeah,
You know, and that carried the load, as it were, for things. Yeah, I remember I didn't remember looking at it at the end of the year. I remember looking at the Pythag, you know, close to the trading deadline, because I remember writing a piece at Substack about how they should sell, because I mean they
hmm
weren't going to sell, but they should sell because it wasn't gonna, you know, this was about to fall apart.
yeah,
And even at that point in time, you know, they were out of the wild card by a game or two, and it just didn't look like there was a chance for them to really make a push, because this team wasn't as good as maybe the record showed, because of the things you said. I mean, I think as I've heard other people say, the difference in um, 23 and 24, almost, I mean, not entirely, but a lot of it boils down to the fact that Ryan Helsley was healthy.
yeah.
And they were able to lock those games down. Otherwise, you might have had 2 years back to back of really terrible games.
Yeah, and you have to wonder too what would have happened this offseason if that had occurred. The
Hmm.
83 wins was and buying at the trade deadline was just enough for them to sort of pretend, just as 2023 was enough for them to sort of say, well, it's just a blip,
Right.
just a fluke. We'll be back next year. And then next year happens and they can say, well, we won 83 games. We were just a little bit of better, performance with runners in scoring position, or maybe a little bit better health away from really contending for that final wild card spot. And you can talk yourselves into a lot of things without actually looking at the reality. With that, it was 2 straight years that by data analysis and runs scored and runs allowed and a lot of other things are simply far below Cardinals standards.
Hmm.
And here we go again.
Yeah, I think we all kind of wanted to give, and maybe we should still, because of what they did do this winter, but you know, give credit at the end of last year at the press conference when they said, "Look, we know this status quo can't help,
Yeah.
can't work," right? I mean, and
hmm
I think that in the past, you're right. They wrote off 23 as a fluke. They still do that, but I think in the past they would have said, okay, well, the 23 was obviously a fluke. Look, you know, we were right there, and if we go out and add another piece or two, we'll be right there. And they didn't do that, to their credit.
Yeah.
They just didn't necessarily fully commit to that either.
Right. It's that in between that they
Hmm.
are currently living, and it's really an in between in a lot of different places. They're John Mozeliak, still around for one more year, a lame
Hmm.
dunk, base president of baseball operations, in between on, you know, going for it full bore with the youth movement, whatever that means.
Hmm.
Because Eric Fetty, Ryan Helsley are coming back. Steven Matz is still on the team for some reason. Maz Michaelis is still projected to probably start on the second or third day of the season. I could go down more lists than that, but we'll probably get to that as we go along here. But they're a team that basically said, let's just kick every can we have down the road and sort of let 2024 be John Mozeliak's sort of walking away quietly party. As I described it on Viva Alberto's, not as a writer, but as a commenter the other day, it's like this is going to be 162 games of there are donuts in the break room to celebrate John Mozeliak's retirement. Like just sort of barely anything happening, and yet you could squint really hard and see this team winning. You could also squint really hard and see this team losing a lot of games.
Yeah, I think that's that middle way that they are working on, which is basically, 1 foot in each camp, allows for that, right? I mean, because you can say, well, if these young guys hit like they were, and maybe even just a little bit better pitching, in a division that maybe is undersold, but still isn't, than NL East or the AL East or anything like that. Yeah, maybe they can, get to 88 wins or something and be in
Yeah.
contention.
Yeah.
But
Well, that's the thing though. I don't mean to interrupt your
no,
thought,
go
but
ahead.
I've been fighting this battle along with payroll. This has been my war, right? My Waterloo in my 5 or 6 years at Viva Alberto's. Every single year, pretty much, since they expanded divisions and changed things around, the winner of the NL Central has won at least, sometimes it's been 90, occasionally it's as low as 90, but typically it's between 93 and 100 wins every season. And you're right, that is not necessarily the NL East or the NL West right now with the Dodgers being whatever they are. But it takes a lot of wins to expect to win the NL Central. And that's an approach the Cardinals haven't had probably since 2015, maybe, something like that. Since then, it's been, well, let's see what happens. Maybe 88 wins will do it. And really, honestly, 88 wins barely gets you into the second wild card most years. And there's a lot of years where 88 wins doesn't even do that. And so, the NL Central is a hard division to win. You've got to really go for it because there is some level of parity. But some team, whether it's the Cubs or it has been the Brewers, some team finds a way to win more games than expected. And you just have to go into it expecting it's going to take 93 wins to win the Central, and it's probably going to take 90 wins to make the playoffs.
Yeah. I wonder how much, I mean, obviously it's not the case in the last 2 or 3 years, but how much some win totals got inflated by, 17 or 18 games against the Pirates or something of that
Yeah.
nature. But, everybody had them, right? I mean,
Yeah, right.
was
Some of those teams are also in the NL, the Marlins in the NL East.
Sure.
There's always games you can play with that, and
Mm-hmm.
having the unbalanced schedule, you probably did help, a little bit. But even last year, in a balanced schedule, Milwaukee won 93 games, and they weren't that good of a team. Philly in the East 95, San Diego 93. I mean, you only had 2 teams in the NL who won more games than Milwaukee, and that's pretty close. And really, actually, looking at all of baseball, 94 wins was the Yankees in the AL East. So, I mean, Milwaukee was right there at 93. It takes a lot of wins to win a division. It just does.
Yeah. I mean, it at least takes planning for that many wins, right? I mean,
Yeah.
the Cardinals have gotten to the point, it used to be that they seemed to aim for 93, 94 wins, and then they kind of shifted to 90, and then they kind of shifted to 88, and now they've kind of given up on a goal as well at all. But
Right.
yeah, I mean, you have to really take advantage of that, and somewhere along the way, I don't know, it is. Where do you think that mindset changed? Because we hear this offseason about how they let development slide over the last 4 or 5 years, but that was such a huge part of their early success. I really don't know who got the eye off the ball and when that happened.
Yeah, Daniel, I can't explain that one. I don't know. That seems so anti Cardinals. That I've been struggling to even kind of come up with an answer. And as great of a job as Katie Wu has done with the reporting this offseason, again today with the article about Nolan Arenado, I mean, she's done phenomenal. I don't think that she's even gotten to the bottom of it. It seemed like it was just sort of like this series of circumstances that led them to make what they felt like was the best decision at the time. But you make a series of best decisions at the time, and you find yourself in a place that you never would have intended that you would
Right.
be. And I think a lot of that goes back to payroll. There's a reason I tracked payroll and worked on payroll every year. I never envisioned, though, that the modest but present increases in payroll that we witnessed from just picking a year at random, but even going back to 2015 again, as sort of this mile marker of transformation in the organizational's goals and win totals. We did see increases from that time, around that time forward. Some of them are modest, some of them a little bit bigger, some of them are basically non-existent. COVID had an impact on that. But I always presumed that they were increasing and sort of moving payroll up without changing the underlying sort of developmental system processes, the things that made the Cardinals way the Cardinals way. And in retrospect, it sure looks like that a little bit of extra funds were kicked into the MLB franchise, whether that's a trade deadline to pick up, your fourth or fifth starter person, add a little bit of payroll to the budget there in July, or that extra guy, that extra reliever in the offseason. Apparently that was coming at the expense of somehow minor league coaches and traveling, positional coaches. Like the numbers don't add up to me at all for that, because your typical starter that you bring in is going to make $3 to $10 million, and your typical system coach is not making in the millions, making maybe in what, six digits maybe. I would say that's probably a stretch for some of them, even that they're not making over 100,000. So I don't see how the math adds up there, but that seems to be the way that it actually was.
Yeah, and I think it would be interesting to see, I don't know, we wouldn't know the numbers, the financial numbers, but even just looking at players and coordinators and all that stuff, how much of that started before pandemic and how much of that
Oh yeah.
really got aggravated by 2020? Was
Yeah.
it the fact that they were going very well and then pandemic hit and then it just dropped off, or were they already on that pace?
Yeah, that would be a great study if it was possible to do. And I'm not sure that it is, because they're not going to give you that level of transparency. But I did track payroll all through, the COVID pandemic, and they did cut substantially. I mean, that's why Colton Wong, if I remember right, exited. He got a very reasonable extension, one that the Cardinals would absolutely pick up under normal circumstances, and they let him go because they're early in that off season. Can't remember the exact timing on months and dates and things like that, but their goal, just like it was sort of this offseason, was to find the floor. What's our floor? Get to the floor as fast as we possibly can, and then let's see what's going to happen with fans and with TV and with our actual revenue. And once we have an idea of what that's going to be like, we can adjust up. And I'm sure the same thing was happening on the minor league system and with their coaching and development system, that any place that they could save a nickel or a dime, or in the case of a player, $1 million, they cut everything that they could possibly cut down to bare bones. And then it became a matter of how quickly are we going to rebuild these things, or are we simply not going to? And I think that's an insightful thing, Daniel. If we could trace it back to COVID, I think that you would see that's probably where a lot of it shifted.
Yeah. Yeah, it'd be difficult. I think that I remember Katie talking about looking in the media guide and just seeing that there's only like 4 or 5 instructors. I mean, if you had enough media guides, you could go back and kind of trace
Yeah.
at least the personnel that way. But we know about Chris Carpenter going to the Angels, and some others that have had roles in the organization and don't anymore.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, we track a
and
lot of that in real time. We just didn't realize the
yeah,
ramifications of it. Yeah,
right.
a guy like Carpenter goes away, and then there's no announcement on who's going to replace them, and then you multiply that by 4 or 5 different guys.
Yeah, yeah, and it's not even just and it's not even just the finances. It's just that institutional knowledge that goes away as well.
Yeah,
And so it is fascinating to see how the Cardinals got so far out that they needed that outside help. Hein Bloom has come in to do this, kind of did his overall audit, and now is getting a chance to put these things into place. But you wonder how far along they would have gone if Hein Bloom wasn't available, right? I felt like it was just that his reputation was enough that the Cardinals wanted to bring him in and put him to work. But if he was still working for Boston, do they do that with somebody else, or do they just, this offseason go out and add another, middling, middling arm, and we sit around at 84, 85 wins again?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know. And I will give the front office, DeWitt, Mozeliak, wherever you want to go with it. I'm not going to necessarily, I don't like to put things on one person.
Mm-hmm.
I think one of the things we've done is put too much blame on Mozeliak when really DeWitt was the one who held the wall the whole time, right?
True.
So with that, though, I think this is just my personal opinion. I think that about the reason why Katie Wood's story broke the way that it did is probably because the Cardinals allowed that to happen. And what I mean is that they weren't hiding any information. They were letting Katie do her job as a reporter, and they didn't try to shut it down either, as far as I know. I've listened to Katie in quite a few times, and I haven't heard any kind of, feedback or anything as far as that goes. That part of me wonders if Mosaic didn't have not Katie's article, but didn't already have a plan in place and know, even from the first moments when Bloom became available, that there was a problem and that he had a pathway that he wanted to take to fix it, and it just so happened that the right guy to do it became available right then. And so I do give them credit for following that path, and I think Bloom is maybe the perfect guy to do what they're trying to do. I'm not sure that I agree with what they're trying to do. I certainly agree with the player development aspect of it, but as far as what we've seen this offseason, for example, I don't agree with a lot of that at all. Actually, I kind of wonder if Bloom would agree with it either, but he's not in charge yet. So,
Yeah.
but I do give him a little credit for recognizing that something about their system was going to need to change, and it needed to start from the inside out.
Yeah. John Mozeliak has seemed to have been pretty open about leaving as much of a blank canvas for Hein Bloom as he can. But you wonder if Bloom is he's like, you can put a little bit of paint on there. That's okay.
Yeah, right. I don't really understand. If you think about it in terms of years, it's the whole thing always goes back to money, Daniel. It's always about the money. If you start to think that it's not, then that's when you sort of lose track of the fact that this is a multi-billion-dollar business here. Just one franchise, just one team is.
Yep.
It is always about the money, and I have a lot of trouble imagining that Bloom, for example, is keen on essentially wasting a full arbitration season of Nolan Gorman, again not playing the position that he's most equipped to play.
Well, yeah.
I mean, I realize that that's not necessarily, lots to go into that, but
Right.
Gorman is not where he needs to be. I would argue that Jordan Walker long term is probably not where he needs to be. That's a whole nother conversation, and you can kind of go down the line a little bit with that. Steven Matz is not the future of this team's rotation. Neither is Eric Fetty. Neither is Ryan Helsley, probably, especially where this team is not spending any money. If I was Bloom, I'd want to be acquiring as many pieces and parts as I possibly could, getting as long of a look at them as I possibly could, and clearing space for the guys in the proper places for them to succeed long term.
Yeah, I think
that hasn't happened. That it just flat hasn't happened.
That's true. I don't know. I mean, Gorman was fine at third. I don't know that he was any superstar at third. So,
right.
And he's played second almost as long as he played third in the organization.
Daniel, I might not be talking about third base.
Oh, that's
when
fair.
I talk about the position that Nolan Gorman
fair.
or Jordan Walker are best suited for long term.
That is fair. The natural inclination is that, but I understand that could.
It is, and I would prefer to let Gorman have a shot at third just to see. But I'm telling you, like, in my opinion, if I was running the organization, I don't know how I would make this happen. Honestly, I don't. I have no clue. I haven't thought it on that level, but in my opinion, the most likely place 3 years from now for Nolan Gorman and Jordan Walker is probably first base. So, those two guys that you got in one position, but you also have a DH, and maybe, I mean, Walker's got a lot of athleticism. I can't believe I'm going to say this out loud, but me and Kyle Reese recorded a podcast episode on the VEB podcast probably 4 years ago, talking about Jordan Walker as a potential center fielder. So who am I to say? That was a long time ago, guys.
Kyle probably had a lot in him right then, so it's okay.
Well, it was during the day, so I
don't know that it matters, but okay.
Shirts were on, but it was really just a fun sort of thing. And the point was that Walker had a lot of athleticism. He had a strong arm. He needed to get out there in the outfield as fast as possible if that was his long-term goal. But so, I mean, maybe there's some hope for him in the outfield, but the stats don't bear it out so far, and neither do they with Gorman at second base. And so, yeah, I mean, I just think that it's another season where a lot of players are sort of testing their hand at a place where they can kind of find, plate appearances and at bats, but the team really isn't positioned to know what it's going to be in, say, 2 years.
Yeah. And, again, like you said, these guys are hitting arbitration and going to start costing money.
Exactly. You might Nolan Gorman could end up, being a second or third year arbitration player and still not really have a position because at no point in his contract was a position available for him. And that's a little bit ridiculous. It really, that really is kind of ridiculous.
Yeah. How much? I know we've talked a lot of us have, about how this offseason has been focused on Nolan Arenado. And what his lack of movement has meant. We haven't really talked about the fact that Wilson Contreras is taking up first base. And again, I'm very happy that he and Sonny Gray wanted to be in St. Louis. These are good players. They're going to help the team. But if you're looking at a long term, I need to see all the young guys. Having those kind of guys probably tweaks their plan a little bit, because I have a feeling Mo was probably a little bit surprised that those two guys were so adamant about staying.
Yeah, I think that I wouldn't say it threw a wrench in his plan, but I think that it was surprising to him. I think in some ways, I think that Musial did a pretty good job this offseason with what he was directed to do by ownership and the hand that he was actually dealt, both with the Nolan Arenado situation and everything that ended up happening with that, but then also with Sonny Gray and Wilson Contreras, two guys that probably had quite a bit of trade value, pretty significant contracts, and also taking up, not really so much with Gray, but definitely with Contreras, also taking positions on the roster that they were hoping to give to some younger players. And when those guys came back and they have no trade clauses, which the Cardinals, of course, negotiated into their contracts, and the players have absolutely every right to use every ounce of leverage within their contractual rights to make their life what they want it to be. Let's just say that out loud. Nolan Arenado could decline trades to every single team in Major League Baseball and in the Canadian League, right? If he wants to, if that's what he wants to do, because the Cardinals gave him a no trade clause. And so I think, yeah, it surprised him probably a little bit that those guys wanted to go back. It speaks a little bit to Cardinals culture, by the way, which we feel like might have, suffered a little bit over the last few years. But here you have proven veterans, respected players. I guess we could call them stars who want to be here even while we're losing. So that says something, and yeah, it did kind of force Musial, I think, to have to sort of go a different direction, along with the payroll constraints that ownership placed on the team.
Yeah, and it's also, as you say, about culture. Not only are these stars that want to stay here, stars that aren't necessarily like deeply established, right? I mean, Gray's had one season, Contreras has had two,
and one of those was pretty tumultuous, to be honest. That first season with Contreras,
first season he gets thrown under the bus, and second season he gets hit by one. It kind of felt like, missing some time and everything of that nature. So yeah, I mean, it could have been easy like, hey, this looked good, but it's not. I like it here, but I want to go win. For those two guys to just really say, hey, this is it. I'm going to, Contreras to the point that I'll move to first base so you can try to play these, young catchers and see what you have.
Yeah. You see there, like, kind of going back to your original question, like I gladly appreciate Contreras' desire to move to first base, and I would definitely want to get him some time at first base, but I don't think that I would have moved him as aggressively as the Cardinals seem to have done. Like it seems to me, and this might be proven wrong, but it seems to me like we can go into this season basically expecting that Wilson Contreras is going to start pretty much every day at first base, and I'm not even sure that he's bringing a catcher's mitt with him, to camp. That's not what I would have done if I was running the Cardinals right now. It's definitely not what I would have done. And the reason why is that when I look at across the roster and I think, okay, this is supposed to be a resetting year. Now they've walked away from that language now as well, but it's supposed to be a resetting year. In my mind, resetting, part of it means, and I've already sort of mentioned this, getting players into the position where you want them to be long term. And so then you start thinking, who are the priorities? Well, I think on one level, they're right that a priority has to be Ivan Herrera. Like, we got to figure out whether this kid can throw, whether he can play catcher, which, by the way, I definitely think he can play catcher. And I definitely think that throwing is something that he can learn to do better. Also, I think that basically every catcher in baseball right now is terrible at throwing because it's so much easier for guys to steal bases than it used to be, which is great for the game personally, bad for catcher stats, but that's another argument. So you want Herrera in there. I kind of take a similar point with Ciani in center field. Who do you want in center field? Well, Michael Ciani in center. Pedro Pages is an interesting and intriguing player as he is. Those guys have future backup written all over them, right?
Yes.
And so
it would be nice if they had current backup written all over them, but that's another.
Well, they do. Yes, they do. Right. Except right now, they kind of want them to potentially be starting. But my point being is that if the Cardinals had just simply said, hey, Contreras, let's just go back to doing what you normally used to do. And let's start you at, say, 80 games at catcher and maybe 40 games at DH. And let's go ahead and give you 40 games at first base too, something like that. Ignore, no, he's not going to play 160 games, but you get the idea, right? And then you can basically guarantee that Herrera is also going to get another 80 games at catcher. And all it does is move your future backup catcher back to AAA to ride the Memphis shuttle. And that to me would have been preferable, because then Gorman could have just started playing first base. Jordan Walker, if you wanted to, could have just started playing first base. That seems less likely with the Cardinals. They seem pretty committed to Walker in right field, and that's okay for now. But especially when Arenado came back, Gorman just goes to first base. Donovan plays second. Herrera starts at catcher. Splits time with Contreras. Contreras DHs a lot. You find positions for Alec Burleson, who is not necessarily a bat you have to have every day because of his platoon splits and his inability to play the field. And you sort of figure everything out from there. Maybe Ciani plays center. Maybe you just go ahead and give that to Victor Scott. The point being, though, the way they have it set up right now is that Gorman doesn't have a position. Ivan Herrera and Pages are going to get plenty of time at catcher, which is good, but it still seems like we're going to see a lot of Pages there. And I don't even think Victor Scott's going to even be on the roster.
No, well, and I don't want him. I don't think I want him on this roster right now, just the way it's constructed, because at best case, he's sitting on the bench.
Right. He can't sit on the bench. He has to hit. He's got to hit, and they've got to just find a center field instructor and just attach him to Victor Scott's hip, because the next time we see him in St. Louis, he should be a better defensive outfielder than Michael Ciani. And yes, I know what I'm saying, because Ciani was amazing, but Scott has more athleticism and is faster and has all the skills needed to be an elite defensive center fielder who could hit a little bit too.
Yeah. Well, yeah, because I thought he was starting to hit pretty well right before before Ciani came back in September. It felt like,
and then Ciani didn't really do anything.
And it just kind of,
and Ciani won't hit, guys. If you're listening, while I appreciate, Michael Ciani really is a tremendous defensive player, and that is valuable, and it's something the Cardinals have valued. But I will just tell you right now, Michael Ciani, don't listen to this. Close your ears. Remember everything good I said about you. Michael Ciani is not going to hit in Major League Baseball. He's not. Like, it's just, he's Pete Kozma playing center. That's just what he is. And I mean, I guess Cosma had that one season where he had like 295, but it was total fluke. It wasn't based on his skill set. Ciani's skill set is that of a 65 to 85 WRC plus player, and And yeah, he comes with a glove, but he just is not going to be a full-time hitter. He can't be. He
Yeah.
doesn't have the skills he needs to do it.
Yeah, and he had that stretch last year that was pretty strong, and so I think that may have skewed some people's thinking on him. But yeah, he's the ideal fourth outfielder, right?
He's just ideal at it. Just
I
perfect.
mean,
Yeah.
yeah.
Put him in the role. Let him play all over the place. Let him sub in for Jordan Walker occasionally. Just let him be a fourth outfielder. That's where you want him to be long term. Let him grow into that role. Let him learn what it means to come off the bench as a pinch hitter, I guess, as a
Well,
defensive
yeah,
replacement.
defensive replacement, yeah.
But you do. But a championship level team needs a guy that can come in and field the outfield, especially with the guys that the Cardinals sort of have out there right now, with Burleson, with Walker, with guys that, frankly, once the seventh or eighth inning rolls around, you might want them in the lineup, but you don't want Alec Burleson playing left field.
Right. Yeah, I thought it was interesting. I think it was all he was talking about, and I don't remember where I saw it or read it, but he was talking about how not only did they need to develop the young guys as starters or whatever, but they need to develop role players. They needed to be able to develop a guy that can come off the bench and get you that hit in the seventh inning and stuff like that. And yes, he only fits right into that idea of being able to come in and, you know, play the bottom of the seventh and the eighth and the ninth or whatever the case may be in a close game.
Yeah, those guys are so valuable to a roster. They really are productive role players. They're making. I'm not criticizing this. I'm just making a statement. They're making Brendan Donovan into a star on this team, and really he's just a very, very productive utility player is what he is. And Sajasi has that potential too. He could be that kind of player as well. Siani could be a really good backup defensive oriented catcher, but put him in that role. And let Herrera learn what it means to catch at the major league level before he has to do it.
Yeah, and then and again, I mean, to some degree, it is finding these things out. I mean, at catcher, you've got Jimmy Crooks that looks to be coming soon, so you need to know
as probably a potential backup too. I mean, he might have some starter upside in him, but his track has been towards, what would I say for a catcher? A platoon split backup catcher. Not 80 games, but 60 or 70 games, something like that.
Yeah.
I might be wrong. I mean, he might outperform that. I'm just saying that's sort of been the expectation for a while. Leonardo Bernal has been the guy that they've said he's got more starter upside. Crooks is more likely to be a backup, but the line is pretty fine, between that level when you're talking about a catcher, because a catcher, you still even Contreras, you only expecting him to catch 60% of the games. So,
we're no more of the 140 or 150 from Yadier Molina.
Right.
That doesn't happen.
Who Jonathan Lucroy, by the way, thinks is the third best catcher of all time. Did you see that?
Yeah, I did.
That was I usually actually ignore Lucroy's stuff on Twitter, but I was like, there you go, man. There you go. There's some love from a Brewer. So
right. And I mean, if the Brewers are saying something,
then it must be true. Yeah,
that's right. I don't. You never see a player discount what Yadier Molina was. And I get that. I don't think players are necessarily the be all and end all on this stuff, because sometimes they get a little too close to it, and hey, this, and they kind of have that little bit of recency bias. But I mean, when you get enough of them, it has to be a data point. So
yeah, well, and I think with something like catcher, we don't have the metrics sort of to dispute it either, and so with catcher, with Molina, at least there's all of this what would you say, word of mouth, I guess. It's not really what I mean, but this reputation, that's the word I'm looking for, this reputation, and it seems to be fairly universal, and you got to put a lot of stock in that. We don't have the metrics. Literally, they don't exist. It's not that Molina doesn't have the metrics, they just literally don't exist. We don't have the metrics to back it up, but yet all appearances by the metrics that we do have seem to support it as well. And so, yeah, I mean, if we want to make the rest of this podcast about Yanni Molina, we probably could, because there's so much to say.
yeah. I mean, it is going to be an interesting vote when he gets on the ballot. Not because I don't think he's going to get in, although that first ballot he'll be there with Albert, and does that take away? Do people not want to vote? Who knows? I mean, it'd be great if they both went in at the same time. Baseball might explode or something. At least most fans would, but we would like it. So yeah, I mean, we don't know where the future is on some of these guys, and this, for better or worse, they've kind of worked themselves into the place where they have to take a season to try to figure this out at the major league level because they
Yeah.
weren't able to figure it out at the minor league level.
Yeah. Yeah. And I will say, at least the Cardinals, they're a very young offense. And
Mm-hmm.
so, Gorman might not. I'm more concerned about Gorman's glove than I am his bat, to be honest. That can be a whole nother conversation. But we're not going to be able to play Gorman where he probably should. He's going to be, rotating between first and second, and a lot of DH and maybe some bench, and possibly I would like to see Nolan Arenado not play 160 games.
Mm-hmm.
If he could get 145, that would give, Gorman a chance to get some looks there. But but really, like with Wynn, with Burleson, with Walker, with I don't really put Newt Bar in this young category, but a lot of people still do. Newt Bar, Herrera, there's a lot of young hitters on the team, and there's going to be lots of plate appearances to go around for those guys. So that's a good thing, because even beyond defense, we have to know if they're going to hit or not. We have to know if Jordan Walker is going to hit, and he really needs to hit this season, or at least show that last season was a total fluke and get back to where he was the year before. But those things, and we'll have a chance to find that out. The pitching staff, I don't like how they've constructed the starting rotation really at all. But I will say that with guys like Matz and Michaelis, and even to some extent Gray, the injury probability is pretty high.
Right.
And so a guy like McGreevy, who I think should be penciled in as a starter, not in pencil, in pin, he should just be a starter. He should get 32 starts, and that should be the end of it. Let him just sort of figure out what it means to be a 180 inning pitcher out there. McGreevy's still going to get his starts probably towards the end of the year. Guys like Matthews and Hintz are going to get some starts. Graceffo might get up there a little bit. Who knows how it's all going to play out? Zach Thompson might get another look, but there's less of an opportunity for them built into the roster, but injuries usually open the door for pitchers regardless. So we should get to see all the players we need to see in something resembling the kind of role that they'll be in the future. It just won't necessarily be in the, here's a role, take it, and you have it for the whole season kind of scenario.
Yeah, I feel like I've talked about this before, but we all spend our time focused on who's going to make the opening day roster, and then like 2 days later they make a transaction, and and it starts to rotate. I mean,
Yeah.
it's not going to be the same. It's not like
No.
it's this is what we're going to see the rest of the year. It's locked in.
Yeah.
So
we talk about a 5-man rotation. It's really like a 10-man rotation, to be honest.
Right. Yeah. I mean, with the Dodgers, it literally is. So, yeah, I think it's. Yeah, I would much rather. The Cardinals have been burned over the last couple of years. Walker and Scott come to mind with overvaluing spring training performances. But
yes, they have.
But I would like maybe an honest competition. If you're not going to just go ahead and put McGreevy in the rotation, then at least an honest competition between, for that last spot. If Steven Matz comes out and has a great spring, okay, fine. But if somebody else pitches better than he does, put him there and give him a shot. It's not like you said, it'll work its way out, because Steven Matz has pitched I think 20 games is the most he's pitched for the Cardinals in any one year. So it's it's unlikely that he or any of these guys are going to stay healthy the whole way through.
Yeah.
But it still would be, it'd kind of be nice to, go ahead and get that started first time around, instead of, you don't want to sit here and like, man, I really hope Steven Matz gets hurt soon. You don't want that.
Right. Yeah, because Matz might stay healthy and not perform. We've also seen him not perform sometimes when he was healthy. But I think what I keep going back to is how can we make the most out of this season? Can we do it by winning? Maybe. Can we do it by slowly getting the guys that we need in the positions and the bats that they need? Sure. But also with these veterans that they kept, instead of moving these guys, they kept them. Okay. So what's the best use of Steven Matz this season? Well, one thing might very well be positioning Steven Matz to where he is at his optimal value at the trade deadline.
Mm.
And so where is that? I think that's what one of the things the Cardinals need to look at is that where is Steven Matz most valuable, not only to the Cardinals, but to another team? Because if he's most valuable to another team, that means he's performing in some role for you, right?
Mm-hmm.
And maybe helping you win, maybe to the point to where you don't even consider trading him, which would be potentially a good thing because at that point you're winning and you're contending. So, and I take again back to Matt's. If he can't cut it in the rotation, even out of spring, just put him in the bullpen. Just put him in the bullpen. They need lefty relievers. They need relievers. Let Steven Matz build up what little value he still has left on his arm in a place where he can succeed. And then when July rolls around, move him on.
That would be ideal both for Mats and it would be ideal for Miles Michaelis. It becomes difficult for me to imagine a team wanting Miles Michaelis at the trade deadline, but if he's pitching well, I know he's got a no trade, but I also feel like with 2 months left to go, and if the Cardinals aren't in contention, if a contender wanted him, he'd move.
Yeah.
And that feels like the best case scenario for Miles Michaelis this year.
Yeah. I think that's probably true. I was looking at his stats. Michaelis, well, yeah, no, I thought it was a little higher than that. I thought his WAR totals, wins above replacement, were a little higher last year than we thought. I will say that if you just look at ERA, which has been bad for Michaelis for a couple of years, that's not the place to look. But his fielding independent pitching, his FIP, has been pretty consistent. 2022 3.87, 23 4.27, 2024 4.24. Probably a little bit above league average, but the kind of performance that another team could look at and say, well, we need a fourth starter, and he gives us innings, and even though he doesn't strike anyone out, he doesn't walk anybody, and so we're guaranteed to get from the deadline on, what is that, like 8 starts, guaranteed to get 8 healthy starts out of a guy who might give us league average production.
Yep.
That's valuable. That's the Cardinals have made a lot of hay trading for exactly that kind of player. And so, yeah, same thing with Michaelis. I don't know if moving him to the bullpen makes a whole lot of sense, but anywhere where he can perform and position himself for a trade is where I want to see. You could say the same thing about Fetty, although Fetty just needs to be in the rotation no matter what, because he should be a very valuable trade commodity. Come July, he was this offseason or this season, last season, I guess. And so if he can just keep up those standards, then we should be able to ship him out for quite a bit of value, or I don't know, do something crazy and re-sign him because they are going to need starters next year. They're not going to have very many of them.
That's true. I mean, they're gonna, for as much as they've developed on the hitting side, and I think going into this one, even if the Cardinals have won 88, 89 games, they wouldn't have done anything or much on the hitting side of things anyway, because, maybe they bring Goldschmidt back or whatever, but that lineup is so young and so good, and there's really nothing much to touch with it. But the pitching side, again, Matthews has made a quick run up the ladder, but, when will he be ready? Tinkins has to stay healthy. Takeo Roby would be nice if he got healthy. All that kind of stuff that it's really hard to say.
Yeah, a lot of ifs in that.
There's not that. There's not that. Okay, we're just holding, or we're holding our breath, waiting time for this guy to, be ready to go, or the Cardinals to decide that this guy's ready to go.
Yeah,
and then there's just not a guy like that right now.
Yeah. I think I was listening to your podcast, Daniel. I'm pretty sure it was, and I can't remember who you had on. So I apologize, but it wouldn't have been that long ago. So you can probably tell me. But one of the things that you guys talked about, and again, if this is not you, I do apologize, but I'm pretty sure it was. One of the things that they were talking about, you guys were talking about, was that that Heimblum, excuse me, does not have a history of aggressively promoting pitchers. That they let those guys simmer and simmer and simmer until they're ready. And the Cardinals have been more aggressive in their promotions, and I'm not sure it's been the best thing for some of these young players. But I think about Matthews, I think about Tinkins. Those are two dynamic arms who should be in the Cardinals plans for the future, and I wouldn't be even a little bit upset if we didn't even hear their names until spring training of next year.
Yeah. Yeah, because we have, and I have talked about it with a few people about this idea that, a lot of times we talk about development, meaning, okay, they're going to bring the young guys up and let them play in the major leagues and not worry about the wins or losses. But I think it also means just as much that they're going to leave a guy down at Memphis, even
Yeah,
when he might be able to give them a win or two or something like that. They might wind up signing some, they might sign Kyle Gibson or something if an injury came up, rather than
yeah.
trying to mess with somebody's development at the minor league level, especially as they increase their instructors and such.
Yeah, yeah. And in the past, there's been that pressure to perform, so
Hmm.
they couldn't really let young players work on the things that they needed to work on the major league level. It was sort of fly or die kind of thing. And I don't anticipate that will be the case this year, especially if we're talking about a scenario where we're bringing up young pitchers, because the starting rotation has either been traded away or they're all injured.
Yeah,
It's pretty much
yeah.
the only way that someone like Quinn Matthews gets up is if there's significant injury or the games don't matter at that point. But yeah, there's no reason not to let Matthews and Hintz work on whatever it is that they need to work on
Hmm.
down there in AAA. Even if they're blowing hitters away, there's always more you can do. There's always that next level of command, of control. You can work that sweeper in, whatever it happens to be. You could do that down in AAA without having to face, the gauntlet and the
Yeah.
pressure and everything that goes into facing major league hitters, because it is just totally different.
Well, and then we've also talked about, or we've heard them talk about, or the idea that sometimes they want the guys to fail, right? I mean,
Oh
if
yeah,
they can have a two
yes,
months great stretch,
yes,
and
that
then as soon as they bring them up to St. Louis, they struggle and they don't know how to adjust to that.
yeah, no, I love these. Like one of the reasons I love late season call ups when it just doesn't matter. Mason Wynn, for example, you got to let these guys
Hmm.
learn over the course of a couple months what it is that MLB pitchers or MLB hitters are going to do against them. Back when I was writing, one of the things I talked about was that first run back in 2020 for Dylan Carlson. He comes up,
Yeah.
right? Unique circumstance,
Hmm.
terrible circumstance in retrospect, but that was what he was dealt with. And for the first time in his life, he sees a major league changeup. Had never seen one before, not like that. And he just sees change up after change up and after change up, and he's just whiffing like crazy, barely making contact, barely putting anything on the ball, can't get it out of the infield. They send him down, right? He fails, but that failure teaches him a great deal about what he's going to have to learn to do in the major leagues. Excuse me, still fighting the flu.
Mm.
The next year he comes back, he's quite a bit better against changeups. And Carlson's career has ended up being what it is, but that moment of adjustment is sort of the same thing has happened to Burleson, it's happened to Mason Wynn, it's happened to some of the pitchers that we could talk about, that a couple months of failing in a safe place can set you up to really launch your entire career from there forward.
Mm. We've talked about pretty much every facet of this team, but when you look at the bullpen, what does that look like for you this year? Because, last year in the offseason, we really gave Mosaic a lot of credit for how he put a bullpen together, trading for players and signing players and,
Mm-hmm.
picking up people up wires, the Rule 5 of Ryan Fernandez. And it really felt like he had, kind of done this pretty well. Now it's pretty much the same guys coming back again. Does that concern you?
In what regard? The same? What do you mean by the same guys? I apologize. I probably the critical part of your question. I was having a coughing fit, and I've got this great mute function on my mic, so I was using that, but it also meant that I couldn't couldn't hear what you were
Yeah,
saying.
but
This
many
thing's great radio,
many people use the mute function when I talk on their podcasts as well,
yes.
so it's fine. No, it was just, again, bullpens are, at least in my mind,
Okay.
they work well 1 year, But if you expect them to work again next year,
Yes.
it's almost like you have to rebuild it every year. And
Yes.
Mo did a great job of building it last year, but we have not seen that kind of activity this year.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, I don't think they have any idea who's going to be in their bullpen. Like I really don't. I think one of the good things in one sense that they've done is sort of collect this kind of interesting sort of array of young arms, from from Fernandez to Liberatore to, but then you think about like Roby, you think of Robersa, you think of Graceffo, even Drew Rom, maybe even, yeah. I mean, just a couple names you could sort of throw into this mix, and even though their bullpen, I wouldn't say that there's a whole lot of space in it. You've got Helsley, you've got Fernandez, you've got King, you've got JoJo. Without looking at it, my brain is spacing, but there's enough space for one or two arms to kind of come up, and I think you're going to see a pretty hefty revolving door as they run through some of these AAA starters and some of their younger relievers, both in AAA and AA, and just sort of see who shakes out and see who can get guys out and see who works, and kind of just sort of treat the bullpen as sort of a place for starters or relievers to go and get some outs and prove themselves, prove that they belong on a major league roster on some level. And if it works, great. If it doesn't, no harm done, because we didn't invest any money in these guys.
Yeah, makes sense. Also, I will say I was reading it pretty much right before we came on, that they had a setback with Drew Rom.
Oh, did they?
And
Yeah.
he's shoulder, and we'll see. Of course, he came off the 40-man this winter, so
Right. Yeah, but I knew he was back with the organization.
he's back with the
so,
organization. But
yeah.
apparently they shots are it's that kind of spring training thing that everybody's healthy till they throw the ball about 2 times, and then they're like, no,
Yeah.
actually this still hurts.
Yeah, I think there's enough arms around. None of them too exciting, but enough around that they can fill out their bullpen and keep it going for a full season, and enough of them have starting experience that they need to cover some innings they can. Like, I'd love to see, Robersa, who I still think has a chance to be an outside chance to be a major league starter. Let him just come in, throw 2 or 3 innings. That's fine, no big deal. And let him learn, because since the odds of him becoming an MLB starter are pretty low, then if he's not an MLB starter, then see what he can do as a reliever, and then go from there.
Yeah, I really expected them to do more of that with Adam Kloffenstein last year instead.
Yeah,
of
I'm kind of
just the one
disappointed that
game.
Kloffenstein, they just cut bait on him. Like, I keep wanting to throw him in there on that list with Robersa and Roby and Rom, and then I really wanted to add Kloffenstein too, and I knew I couldn't because he was gone. But I would have taken a look at him as a reliever a little bit, but they know more than I do, so.
Yeah, we think so, at least. Sometimes lately we're kind of questioning it. I guess
I'm usually right, and these guys that actually look at the analytics for real are usually wrong. Yeah, I could claim that when I was a writer on Viva Alberto's, but no, folks, I don't have any idea what I'm talking about, and neither does Daniel.
No, they know that. I've done enough shows; they know how much I know, and that's very, very little. But anyway, well, Jason, it's been fun. Before we let you go, won't you? I know, again, you're not at Viva Alberto's except for as a member of the comment section that gets to throw insults at the writers, which is instead of being on the other end of that. But what are you up to these days?
Well, Viva Alberto's readers will know I finished my doctorate last year, and so since all of that got done and they added those prefixes to my title, I've been trying to find ways to use my dissertation topic out there in the real world. And so honestly, one of the reasons that I got into writing for the Cardinals was to just sort of see if I could write. I've written some stuff in the past and had some good feedback, but a lot of it was sort of informal. And so I figured, hey, if I could write at Viva Alberto's, if I could write in the Cardinals world, which is pretty picky, pretty hard, environment to write. And if I could do that, then I could write anywhere. And that worked out pretty well for me, Daniel, to be honest. Like, I felt like my 5 or 6 years at Viva Alberto's, that my stuff was well received by everyone except for Harrison Bader. Very few of you will get that, but there's a story for another day about my first article at Viva Alberto's that Bader picked up and trashed. But anyway,
And now
but
he's no
once
longer a Cardinal, so let's
no
see
longer
see what
Cardinals. Yes,
happens.
and by the way, I'll just say too that I was completely right. Like I was right about it. I mean, I was
Yeah.
like he had to learn how to hit breaking balls, and he was doing a lot better, and he did. That's exactly what he did, and he's built a long career not off of his ability to hit breaking balls, because sorry, I'm defending myself for something that happened 6 years ago. That's my personality, but just the ability to hang on against them was all he ever needed, and he has, and now he's been a very productive major league player for a fairly lengthy career. Anyway, my point was, can I write? Yeah, I can write. I can build a community. People want to read what I have to say and hear what I have to say. And so once I finished my doctorate, my real world is the church world. I'm a pastor in Missouri, in Cape Girardeau, and I work with a lot of other pastors, and I work with a lot of small churches in small towns. And so once I stopped at Viva Alberto's, the reason I stopped there was to start something called Sacred and Small, which is a podcast. Same thing I did at Viva Alberto's, a podcast and a blog for small church pastors about church leadership and cultural change and all the things that it takes to be a small church pastor in the Midwest, which, by the way, I think is one of the most difficult jobs out there. So yeah, so that's what I'm doing now.
It is a challenge. Oh, cool.
It's very challenging.
Very
yeah,
cool.
yeah.
So, but again, still throwing in a few pennies over at Viva, even if it's not on the front page. So,
yes, you can find my work in the comments section on the occasional Viva Alberto's writer. And if you thought that I held back as a writer, which I did, I do not as a commenter. So
yeah, you kind of led the I don't know, maybe there wasn't as much change. I just know you and Blake both left at about the same time, so it felt like an era was ending with y'all two.
Yeah, it kind of was. But I will say though that I think Heather's done just a great job, and a lot of the new writers are carrying on that sort of. There's a Viva Alberto's vibe that you don't get just everywhere, just like there was a Birds on the Black vibe, right? There's just sort of this personality to some of these sites, and Viva Alberto's and your podcast and Birds on the Black kind of have their own vibe, and Heather Scooter Simon over there has done a great job of finding some writers from inside, our commenters that get the vibe and are able to take on some of the analytics and some of the personality. And so you'll see some of our writers now, they'll do an analytical breakdown, and then they'll do 1,200 words on their favorite beer or their favorite music. And that's just what Viva Alberto's has always been.
Always has been. Always has been.
So I'm glad to see it's really doing very well. Yeah, without me. So
it is the standard of Cardinal blogging, and while that doesn't say as much as it used to, just because of the limited number of blogs, it still holds its place with great pride. So
yeah.
All right, well, Jason, it's been a lot of fun. We'll do it again at some point in time, I'm sure. Even though you're no longer in the profession, as it were.
I do try to keep up at least a little bit.
That's right.
I still love the Cardinals, so
that's the important thing. So, all right, next week, Ben Cerruti will be here. We'll talk about his projection system and how that's going. Look forward to talking to Ben. But until then, for Jason, I'm Daniel. Good night.
And the home of the